Hi guys, it's Marlene. In this video, I'm going to show you how to optimize your Lumix L10 for photography. Now, if you're new to Lumix or new to the L10, this video's for you. If you have other Lumix cameras, these settings I'm going to show you will also work. I use them on my G9 Mark II, my G100, my S9, and my S1 Mark II cameras, as long as they contain all of those possible features. But basically, what I'm going to show you, I use for all my Lumix cameras. Now, I've made a couple of other videos about setting up the Lumix L10, and one of them was about the custom modes, and I probably jumped ahead a bit there. And if you've used Lumix cameras before, or most cameras have custom modes, and that wasn't too much of a surprise. But this video I'm going to mostly be talking about the quick menu, and the quick menu is where you store all the settings that you change most often. So it's not a preset, it's where you can access the settings that you need to change without having to do a menu dive. And that's why it saves you time to have these things loaded up in your quick menu. Now, all the Lumix cameras I have a quick menu, and I set them up very similarly between all of them so that I have access to my favorite settings. So the first thing I like to do when I get a Lumix camera is to set it up with the things that I use the most and are most common. Now, there are a lot of external functions with this camera, and you can customize each of these or just leave them as they are. Now, if you're a beginner, I suggest, just leave the ISO, the white balance, and the drive mode and the focus points where they are. But what I will show you what to do is let's set up the quick menu. And the quick menu is my favorite function of my Lumix cameras, besides the fact that they can take good photos. So when you press the quick menu, you have 12 menus here, and those are the options or the settings that you use most commonly or the ones that are your favorites. Now, I don't really need auto ISO in here because I have ISO here, so that's sort of a duplicate. So I can remove that one later. But first of all, let me show you how to customize the quick menu. So you go into your menu, and you go on to the gear icon, third page down, QMenu settings. So if you go into QMenu settings, you choose your layout for photo or video and S&Q mode. So I'll just show you what these two are. This is mode 1, which is what I have, and this is mode 2. So let me show you what mode 2 looks like. Mode 2 is that way. And it still has the 12 options across, but I kind of prefer mode 1. So let's go back into the menu, QMenu settings, and mode 1. But it's up to you which version you like of that. I like to see a preview of my photo. And again, if you have mode 2, you see more of the options available. Okay, so quick menu settings again. So let's go to customize the items in photo mode. So right now you can see that I've got photo style in the first box, white balance, ISO, etc., etc. Now I probably don't need white balance or ISO in those spots because I have white balance and ISO in these spots on the D-pad dial here, on the back dial. So if I want to change that one, I just go to the menu item, and I can say instead of white balance, I can choose anything, really anything that I want. So I'll just go down and maybe I'll choose picture size, which again is something that I do change once in a while, but you can see that I have a duplicate. So I've already got picture size in there. But I'm just giving you some ideas of what you can change. Sometimes I use iDynamic, so let's leave that one at iDynamic. Then let's change the ISO one to, let's see, what do we got in here? Maybe filter effect, because sometimes those menus are buried quite deep in this camera. Okay, so now when I go to my quick menu, if I go to iDynamic, I can change iDynamic. Now I have a whole video about iDynamic, What it does is it gives you basically a dynamic range boost. So just to quickly go over this high boost, you can see my preview changing. Standard, low, and auto. And just turn it off. So typically I leave it off, but let's say, example, I'm shooting in an area that has a deep shadow and there's something in that deep shadow that I want to be able to see better, then I would adjust my eye dynamic settings. And you can see in the preview what happens. Okay, let's go into filter effect. And these filter effects are quite fun. Now to change the filter effect, I can just use this top dial here and scroll through, and you see you get a preview of what those are. I actually have a whole video about filter effects too, and I will link that in the video description as well. Some of the other things I like to change: RAW plus JPEG. Sometimes I don't want to shoot RAW files. Perhaps when I'm shooting maybe a stop motion video, things that take a lot of photos, I would probably shoot JPEGs only for that. And if I'm shooting raw landscapes or something that the lighting's really tricky, or maybe even client work, I might choose RAW only. But for the most part, I'm either shooting JPEG or JPEG plus RAW for my photos. Especially on the L10, I often don't even open up those RAW files because this is my fun camera and I like to do very little post-processing with this camera. Next up is autofocus, single shot, and continuous. Now this is something I do recommend you set up in your quick menu because it is a menu dive for sure. And that's something that you might want to change a lot. Now this spot here also corresponds to this spot here. Let me just put that on. So you can see that, quick menu, it's the same menu. So you might not need this, but you could also program this to be something else. Another thing you can do is customize which one of these focus areas that you can choose from. And you know, I very rarely use the line, so I'll show you later how to get rid of that on your menu. Okay, next up is the autofocus detection setting. And if you turn it on, then you have to go to the next autofocus setting and choose, and you have to hit the set button there, choose which type of setting you want. Human, animal, car, motorcycle, train, airplane. And if you pick human, are you doing human eye face? Are you doing human eye face body? So, or urban sports, which is what I use for skateboarding, dancing, that kind of stuff. But let's just say you're doing portraits, so you want perhaps human eye and face detection. And that's something else that you might not necessarily want to menu dive for, because if you are shooting people, you don't want to be futzing in the menus too much. Stabilization. I probably would leave this on unless I'm using a tripod. I would turn it off. Next down we have shutter type. Okay, this camera has a mechanical and a electronic shutter. So you can do auto, you can choose electronic shutter, or you can choose electronic shutter plus noise reduction. If you use mechanical, you're limited in shutter speeds. It doesn't go past 1/2000th of a second. So if you need faster than that, you have to change it to electronic. So I'll leave mine on auto for now. Now this is picture size, which is something that I sometimes change if I'm shooting time-lapse or stop motion video. I don't want a stop motion video or a time-lapse with huge files, because then that, you know, depending on how long it is, then that video is huge. You know, you don't really need to go past 4K, which is probably somewhere between medium and small. Actually, it's right there. Probably small is big enough for a 4K file. And the last one is crop zoom. That's another one I like. Now, I'm not saying those are my favorites, but sometimes I probably will switch some of those around. But definitely, I always want to put these focus ones on and the photo style one on. The rest, I would say, are kind of optional. I don't use them as much, but I always use photo style, and I always use these four focus settings: autofocus, continuous or single shot, and the area and the subject detection. So if nothing else, I suggest you program those 5 things right off the bat. And as you start to use your cameras, you can decide which ones are a bit more important for you because you might need more access to them. Okay, let's go to the video mode and push the quick menu button again. And you can see that the settings are much different than the ones for photo. Now, if you go to the S and Q, you can see here that S and Q is grayed out. So if I go down to the S and Q menu, push the Q menu again, you can see that S and Q mode is now lit up. If you hit the menu set button, you can choose the frame rate. So that is how you get into that. I'm going to try a few other settings that I think are important for beginners, especially to beginners to Lumix. Right below the quick menu, you have something called touch settings. Go into that menu, and if you don't like the back touch screen, you can turn it off. Okay, so you can turn it off, and what that means is that when you touch the back, nothing happens. I'm going to go back into turning it on. All right, and now you can see that my focus point moves around because I'm touching the back of the camera, and I can make my focus area larger by controlling this little dial at the back. And once I get my size, I just hit set. So sometimes having a touch screen is a pain in the butt, depending on what you're doing. In the studio, I don't have a problem using it, but sometimes when I'm out in the field, I get into trouble because I accidentally touch the back of the camera. My nose might touch it, or when I grab it, I might grab it here, and then if I'm shooting a scene with subjects far and near to the camera, I might miss focus on them. So that's one of the reasons you can miss focus. Touch AF is meaning that it's changing focus only, or autofocus and auto exposure. I just want to touch the back of the screen for focus. Another thing is touch tab. Now, right now the touch tab is off, but when the touch tab is on, the touch tab is this sideways menu. When you touch it, it comes out, pops out, and you can see more options. You have function buttons there. You can add your histogram. This is your stabilizer. So it's off. So that is your touch tab, and that has other things that you might use on the camera that are just that you want to be readily available. In this case, it's filters. Okay, let's get rid of the touch tab. I'm not a fan of touch tab, so I'm going to turn that off. Okay, let's talk about another menu on this setup page, and that is function button set. And you can change the operations of some of the buttons on the camera to some other function. Now, as a beginner, just be careful what you do, because if someone else uses your camera, or if you hand your camera to a family member to photograph you, they might not know what to do with the camera. It might be too confusing for them. But if you're okay with it, and if you have a bit more experience with function buttons, you can change things. So instead of this being ISO, you can make it into something else. I could even make the quick menu button into something else. So you have to be careful when you do that, that you remember what you did. And if you totally get confused, well, then you can reset your camera to the defaults. I'm just going to leave this for now, but I'll just show you that you can change all sorts of things on the quick menu. And here's the flyout menu, and you can add things to the flyout menu as well. That's probably something that I might change, the touch tab menu. And you can also change, as you can see here, everything that's on the wheel. So white balance can change to something else, but I'm going to just leave those for now. So in the L10, because it has a power zoom, we're going to talk about zoom settings. So in the zoom settings, you have a couple of choices. You have a step zoom, or you just have a manual zoom operation. So right now it's on the manual zoom operation. And as I push the button on the top, the lever, I just zoom in. Now you can see here that it goes up to 104, even though the lens itself is going to 75 millimeters, but I have crop zoom on. Okay, and the other setting is step zoom. And when we do step zoom, it has a preset focal length. So it went from 24 to 28, 28 to 35, 35 to 50, 50 to 70, 70 to 75, and all the way to 104. Okay, let's talk about the back dial here. The default setting is that the back dial controls shutter speed, and I find that this dial is too sort of easy to move around, so I like it to be shutter speed up top. Because this has a manual aperture dial on this camera, I will choose the aperture on the lens and choose the shutter speed up here. So to do that, you need to change it to set 3. So in shutter priority, it's shutter speed, and in manual, it's shutter speed. So those are the two modes that I shoot most in. And if you're shooting in aperture priority, you can change the aperture on the lens as well. Now you can change that to whatever you want, but this is my preference so that when I'm up here, you can see that the shutter speed is changing. Whereas before it was changing down here, and like I said, I find this dial just a bit too easy to move. As you can see, it's very easy just to get into white balance if you push it too hard. So I have a whole video on how to do that. So if you need a review, you can just check out that video. Okay, next I want to talk about this button here, which is the LUT button. Now, right now, if I push display, you can see that my photo style is standard. It's in the bottom corner here. And by the way, if you push display, it just rotates through, it cycles through the different views you get of your display. I typically like a very minimal display once I'm shooting, but if I'm setting it up, sometimes I like this full one, this black and white one, or I just like to see all the other things on the options. Actually, I'm going to put the camera up just a wee bit so we get, there you go. You can see that a bit better. Okay, so let's push this LUT button. So when you push the LUT button, LUT stands for Lookup Tables, and what that allows you to do is import custom color styles into the camera directly, and you do that through Lumix Lab. Now you can download LUTs into the Lumix Lab and transfer them to your camera, or you can create your own, or you can use the ones that are already in the camera. So there's 3 sample LUTs. And then there's vlog, which is for filmmaking. So it gives you more cinematic options to color grading. But basically you have 4 already in there. LUT 1, 2, 3, and vlog. But it's a bit confusing to get out of this LUT menu when you first start using it. You're like, what do I do? So yeah, you can just go back into the quick menu. Or you can, while you're in that LUT menu, if you push the quick menu, it'll go back into the photo styles directly. Okay, I want to talk about the control ring lock. So there's a menu called control ring lock, and right now it is not locked. So the lock is off. If you move the focus ring, it's going to act as a zoom ring. And you can see that I had my presets also. So it will zoom to those preset focal lengths. Okay? If you don't want that to happen, turn it on. So right now it's locked. Okay, so you know there is a manual focus switch on the lens. So if you want to focus manually, you have to make sure that the control ring lock is off. Okay? Now the control ring is the focus ring. So right now it's off. And if I turn it, a scale comes up and I can manually focus. Okay? Now, just so you know, if you push the AF on button, unless you've changed the function of it, you can actually use that as a starting point for your manual focus as well. You can choose the area you want to focus in. You can just tap the back of the screen if your screen's activated and push it and it will focus. But if you're not quite happy with the focus of what that did, then you can fine tune it, and you can see here that I'm throwing it out of focus. But if the control ring lock is on, what that does is change. It does not change the focus, okay? So it doesn't allow you to change. You'll have to go into control ring lock. That would be a good thing to add to your quick menu, now that I'm thinking about it. Another thing you might want to add to your quick menu is the manual focus guide or the manual focus assist. So if I put the manual focus assist on, I think it gives me, oh no, I've got to unlock that. There we go. Manual focus assist. Let's see what happens when I focus. Yes, I get an enlarged area and I can move that around. That is going to help me to focus, especially when things are a bit far away. I mean, I have a very simple focus target right now, but if you were shooting a landscape and you wanted like a certain tree in focus, you definitely want your manual focus assist. I also like manual focus assist when I'm shooting astrophotography, stars, especially. It helps me to focus on the stars. So there's a few little things to watch out for in this setup menu. And don't forget about that control ring lock. Okay, I'm going to go back to autofocus. And whether I push the shutter or this, I'm focusing. And you can see here that it's changed back to autofocus. On the back of the camera here, AFS it says. Here, if I change the dial, let me just move it down because we also have there's autofocus macro, the little flower, and MF means manual focus. Okay? All right, so quick menu. I like it, autofocus single or autofocus continuous. Typically, if nothing's moving, I'm leaving it on single shot. Now, what if your photo is slightly too dark or slightly too light and you're in automatic ISO, like I am in here, but you want to change your exposure slightly and you don't want to mess around with too many exposure settings? So what you can do is push the exposure compensation button, which is on the top of the camera. And when you do that, you see a scale coming up and you can move it with the top dial. So you can add light or you can take light away. So example, if you're shooting something that's really backlit and you want your subject to show up, you can add light. Or if you have something against a white sky or a white wall, you definitely know that the meter is going to be a bit fooled, so you might need to add some light. And like if you're shooting against black velvet, then typically it's going to automatically brighten up the scene, so you might want to take some light out to make those blacks dark. Another thing you might want to change is aspect ratio, especially if you are shooting a video in 16:9 format and you're going to take photos to go with it. You can change your aspect ratio here, or you can change it on the lens itself. But don't forget, you can also program that aspect ratio switch on the lens to other functions. You can also just pop in your aspect ratio into your quick menu if you want. Another thing this camera does is bracketing, and most cameras do that. Now you can bracket focus, you can do f-stop bracketing, exposure, so you can bracket white balance, but right now I'm in auto white balance. Now this camera also does focus stacking, and what focus stacking is it'll take photos at different focus distances and then it will put them together. Now it does give you a JPEG file, and I have a whole video on focus stacking. It's using the S1 Mark II, but the theory is the same. Now we talked about crop zoom when I set up my quick menu, but you actually have to set up your crop zoom. And to set it up, basically you're choosing the minimum image size. So I have mine at medium, but what that does, it allows you to crop in. Now you can crop in your photos, of course, on the computer, but if you're using crop zoom, I find it easier to compose. And if you do a small file size, so 5 megapixels, which is still a really good size, I mean, you don't go bigger than that for social media, and that's a 2x crop. Now, if you go extra small, it is basically like a 2K file. I like to use medium because I feel like I can get away with cropping if I need to get closer to my subject. But say you're out birding and you really want to get that bird, you have to crop a bit more into it if you want. Shutter type here is something that I have in my quick menu, but I want to show you what happens when silent mode is on. You can see that the shutter type is grayed out, and it doesn't let me change it because it says silent mode is on. So if I take silent mode off and I go into shutter type, and I go into mechanical, and I turn silent mode on. It actually doesn't let me. So it changes it automatically to electronic shutter. So mechanical shutter and silent mode don't play well together. If you want silent mode, it has to be electronic. Now, I just leave it on auto, but you can also do it electronic and noise reduction. So I don't use that either. But yes, so if you have a problem with silent mode, you have to make sure that your shutter type is properly set up. And these menus really should be in one menu, as far as I'm concerned. Burst shot is something that I like to use. Burst settings, we have a lot of choices in these Lumix cameras. Super high is 30 frames a second, super high at 20 frames a second, super high at 10 frames a second. Pre-burst, 30 frames a second pre-burst, 20 frames a second pre-burst, and 10 frames a second pre-burst. Pre-burst is for when you don't know when the action's going to happen, so you hold the shutter button down halfway, and when the action starts, you push it all the way, and what'll happen is it will pre-record when you're half pressing the shutter. So that's pre-burst. Use with caution because it really fills up the camera. I don't mind medium speed burst when I'm shooting my sports, like my skateboarding and stuff. I can usually time it pretty well that I don't need more than medium speed. And to get into that menu shortcut, you can go into the drive mode here as well. But yeah, if you want more settings, you just go into here, and all the settings I just showed you in the menu are in here. So you don't really need to set this up in the quick menu because it is actually on the back of the camera. And speaking of this back menu here, this is your drive mode. There's a single shot, there is burst, medium with live view, which I like. There is time-lapse animation set up in here and stop motion animation and self-timer. Hit more settings and you can do a 2-second. You can even do, let's go back in there, more settings. You can even do 3 shots. Time-lapse, I have a whole video on time-lapse. Live view composite, oh baby, I love this. I have a video on live view composite. It works the same in all Lumix cameras. And the self-timer we talked about, you can change the self-timer on this dial or in the menus. We'll just leave it at 10 seconds. And this camera does multiple exposure. So that's kind of fun to play with too if you're into multiple exposures. But I will not play with that right now. Now remember I said that you can hide certain autofocus modes if you're not using them a lot. So this is where it is. It is in the gear, autofocus, page 2. So you can go in there and anything that you're not planning to use, you can turn it off. I don't use the horizontal vertical mode, so I'm actually just going to get rid of that. So now when I go into my focus settings, it's gone, okay? Because I rarely use it. In fact, I don't use pinpoint very much either, or one area. And by the way, I often use this AF on button. I just find it's really handy when I'm shooting. If you don't want the shutter button to control focus, you can actually turn it off and just use this button at the back for focus. And I do this often when I'm birding. Now, half press shutter, right now it's off and it won't take a picture. But if we go into and turn it on, it will take a picture when you half press. And that's a little touchy. So you might take pictures that you don't want. So I just leave that off and I like half press for checking my focus. If we go into the playback menu, so this is auto review. Now, when you take a picture, it automatically reviews it. You can turn it off or on. You can hold it for 1 second, 2, 3, or you can put it right off so you don't see a preview. But if you put it on hold, when you take a photo, it allows you to hold it there. The preview will stay there until you press the shutter button again, and then it's back into picture taking mode. Another setting I like to set up is photo grid line. Helps with composition. So there, I don't know if you can see it very well, but there is a little grid line on my frame. Now, there are a bazillion more menus that I could talk about, but today I'm going to stop there because we could go on for an hour here. But this is intended just to get you started, especially if you're new to Lumix and if you're into photography. For video, it's going to be a whole other menu dive. To be honest, when I want to shoot video with this camera, I just push the button right there on the top of the camera. And that's all I do. And most cameras it's red, but not on this one. Have fun with your Lumix L10. If you have any questions, let me know. And if I missed any of your favorite menus, let me know in the comments below. If this video has helped you, please consider buying me a coffee. The link to that is in the video description below, or a super thanks, whatever works for you. See you soon.